Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite anthology series. We just got done talking about The Twilight Zone last week, the most recent season that came out with Jordan Peele. This week, Charlie Brooker's Netflix series Black Mirror premiered, the 5th season. It's cool to live in a time when we're at peak TV. I don't think it's sustainable, especially once Disney comes in and starts dropping their dick on the table with their streaming service, but at the very least we get a lot of interesting shows coming out, so it's cool that Black Mirror is back. It's been a little bit. The last time it was on, we saw Bandersnatch, their choose-your-own-adventure style Netflix thing, but we're back to a regular season, and this season actually has 3 episodes instead of the previous Netflix season's 6, which I actually think helped to focus it. So let's talk a little bit about what happened this season. There will be spoilers, so if you haven't watched it yet, go ahead and check that out and then come back here. But yeah, without further ado, let's talk about the dark, bleak emptiness that lies at the heart of the human soul in video games. So first, let's talk about the first episode of the season, Striking Vipers, or if you'd rather, Broke Black Mirror. This episode was, I think... how do I put this? This was sort of the anti-San Junipero for me. San Junipero is one of the best episodes of Black Mirror, precisely because it sort of subverts the expectations of a dark ending, and instead has just kind of a nice love story and an interesting philosophical discussion about whether or not human beings have the right to live virtually forever. Multiple meanings on the word virtually there. But at the end of the day, it was a happy ending for everyone, and it resolved itself well. Striking Vipers, on the other hand, is sort of an interesting companion piece to that, and perhaps even to hang the DJ, the other sort of relationship-y one from the previous season, Season 4. Striking Vipers begins with a group of friends that looks like they're sharing an apartment or something together in the city, and they're playing some sort of Street Fighter type game, and then it cuts forward, and they haven't seen each other in like 7 years, and now the friend gifts the other friend. They're both grown up, they have relationships, one of them's married, one of them's trying for a kid, and they give them the new, like, Street Fighter VR or whatever, but it's, of course, Black Mirror VR, so you have the thing on the side of your head, and it actually sucks you into the reality of the game. Now, once they get into the game, one of them plays a female character and discovers very quickly that they have sexual tension, and they end up having this virtual affair, basically, in which these two platonic male, ostensibly straight best friends end up banging each other on the regular because of their virtual avatars. And because of their close platonic connection that they already have being amplified by these different physical bodies. So this episode delves into a lot of themes. I mean, I guess it delves into themes of potential bisexuality, or at the very least bi-curiousness. It touches on a little bit of perhaps ideas of transgender discovery, because one of the characters talks about what it's like being in a female body, and they seem to really like it. They focus a lot on the sexual aspect, because that's mostly what the episode is about, is their affair. But they do touch upon how he feels like good in the female body and stuff, and it's interesting. I actually wish they would have focused a little bit more time on that, but the episode overall is incredibly heartbreaking, because you see this connection these two people have, brought together by this new technology. But of course, unlike San Junipero, where, I mean, you have some sad stuff in that episode, like one of the women's daughters had died at a young age, and her ex-husband had died. That stuff was in the past, and those relationships were more or less resolved. Currently, in this episode, they're both, at the very least, the main character played by Anthony Mackie. The other character is Yaha Abdul Mateen II, who plays Carl. Danny and Carl are the characters. Anthony Mackie's really good in this episode too, by the way. But Anthony Mackie is having trouble with his wife in general, and of course, as the affair continues, she starts to notice things. It's implied she wants to go and find some sort of extramarital affair as well. The only criticism I really have of this episode is they spent so much time on just showing the characters banging each other. There was like a montage of it, and at a certain point we kind of get it. I wish they would have led up to their initial kiss and maybe their initial banging, let's say, a little bit slower, because the first time that we see them, they do it, basically. They're, at the very least, they make out. I feel like we should have had a normal fight, and then they leave, and then they maybe flirt a little bit, and it's a little bit different. Maybe they're not even intending to flirt, but it's like they're just hanging out like two dudes, and because of one of them being in a female body, it's a little bit different and comes off as flirtatious. I don't know. You could have cut out, I think, that initial scene at the beginning with them playing video games in college or whatever, and instead had a little bit more of a build-up to the relationship. Because all the thing at the beginning said was they've been friends for a long time, and they played this video game. Like, that's all stuff we could have been shown through other dialogue, or just when he shows up at the party 7 years later, he could have just been like, oh man, we haven't played this in forever. Like, it's not something we had to see to understand necessarily, so that was just a little bit of a time balance thing. So then, eventually, Anthony Mackie's character, Danny, decides to cut it off because it's weird, and he's having a kid, and his wife confronts him about perhaps having an affair. So he cuts his friend Carl off from the relationship, but Carl is, like, adamant that he needs this, that it's, like, this thing that he can't go without, and there's a discussion about whether or not it counts as an affair, is it porn, is it whatever. I'd say it's an affair, but whatever. It's not like we don't consider, for instance, in the real world, sexting someone. Like, you'd be mad if you found out your significant other was doing that. So I don't see how this isn't an amplified version of that, but regardless, people do make excuses like that in real life, so it makes sense that they'd make it in the episode. A year goes by, roughly, and then Danny's wife invites Carl over for dinner for a birthday, because she doesn't know that they have this basically jilted ex-lover relationship going on. And Carl comes over to their house, it's awkward. The funniest line of the season gets said, in which Carl says something along the lines of, he's explaining, like, I tried to get over you by fucking all these other different characters, the computer-controlled characters, and also other players, and one of the characters on the video game is a polar bear, and he goes, like, I fucked a polar bear, and I still couldn't get you out of my mind, and that's a pretty good line, that's funny. And the episode ends up ending, or first, actually, they meet after this dinner, after a confrontation, and they decide to kiss in real life to see if there's really something there, or if it's just the avatars. Carl's character after the kiss is like, oh no, it's nothing, it's just the characters, it's just the sex, it's just whatever. But Danny, it appears, maybe feels something a little bit more. But to save face, he agrees with his friend. He's like, oh yeah, nothing, it was nothing, whatever. So that's a pretty heartbreaking moment. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you want this character to be happy, but on the other hand, he does have a family and responsibilities, and you know. So anyway, they leave. They get in a fight. They get arrested. The wife finally has to pick up Danny. Danny ends up explaining to her what happened, and then it cuts to the final scene a year later at his birthday yet again. And on the birthday, the wife gives him a gift, and it is the video game VR thing, and he gives her a gift, which is the box for her wedding ring. And it appears that every year, on his birthday, he gets a hall pass to go and fuck his friend in this video game, and she gets a hall pass to go to a bar and fuck some stranger. And, you know, it's a real bittersweet ending. It's real sad. It's a little bit like Brokeback Mountain, except one of the characters didn't die or anything. It's just like polyamory's cool, and that's great if you have an open relationship or whatever. But it really appears in this situation Anthony Mackie's character would have been happier had he been with Carl. But, of course, situations just don't bear that out. And that's a lot of Black Mirror. It's just like, yep, that's a thing, but you're stuck in this situation, and it's really sad. So this is probably my second favorite episode of the season, of the three. It had really good philosophical questions about sexuality, about identity, stuff like that I think will make people think a little bit. In a world where you can virtually become anyone, gender identity and identity in general becomes a little obfuscated. So what does that mean for what gender or identity is at all at that point? I don't know. I found it interesting, and it's one of those Black Mirrors that I think will make you think, but also make you laugh a little bit with what's going on with, like, the polar bear remark and stuff like that. So, overall, good episode. Episode 2. Smithereens. This is my favorite episode of the season. This stars Andrew Scott of Moriarty fame and other things from Sherlock, and Damson Idris, who was actually in the Twilight Zone 2019 episode Rewind. He was the son in that, and Topher Grace. So Damson Idris was in both Twilight Zone 2019 and in Black Mirror this year, which is kind of cool for him. 2 sci-fi anthology shows. Now this episode is a more grounded Black Mirror episode. It's one of the ones sort of in line of Shut Up and Dance that, like, it's a little bit future, but really it could take place today. It's just more a parable or a tale to talk about what could be done with modern technology and what is done with modern technology. What happens is Andrew Scott's character, Chris, his girlfriend died a while ago. He sees everyone on their phones constantly, just looking at him, and he starts going crazy about it. He's also in a support group because his girlfriend died in a car accident with a drunk driver, and in this support group he has a friend whose daughter killed herself. Now, this daughter had an account on some sort of Facebook-like app of some sort, and the mom just wants to get into this account to try and figure out if, by looking at the messages, she could figure out why she killed herself. Was it the mom's fault? Of course, we know as an audience, I really, really severely doubt that it's the mom's fault for whatever reason, but it's really heartbreaking seeing her wanting to get into this account, and she can only try and log in 3 times a day before the account locks itself. And we see she keeps a notebook where she tries all these passwords every day, in this vain hope of trying to get into the account. And she's called the company, and they won't let her have the number because of their privacy policies. Anyway, Adam Scott's character gets fed up, he's like an Uber or Lyft driver. He goes to the headquarters of this Facebook-like company, and he picks up someone who's in a suit from there, drives him out into the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a farm field, and takes him hostage, and essentially says, you get Mark Zuckerberg on the phone, who's played by Topher Grace. It's not Mark Zuckerberg, but it's essentially Mark Zuckerberg if Mark Zuckerberg had charisma. And he's like, you get him on the phone, or I'm going to kill this guy, this employee of yours. And things escalate and escalate and escalate. But the interesting focus of the episode is it almost takes place in real time. We'd have to watch it again to see how many of the cuts seem to cheat the time. But from the time the police show up to the end of the episode seems pretty linear as far as the passage of time. Now, Adam Scott, while he's holding hostage in the car, we cut between the cops finding information and finding information about him via traditional police methods, going to the house, asking some people. Then we cut to the Facebook-like company. They have access to Adam Scott's digital footprint, essentially. They find everything he's ever done, and they're bringing up stuff to the cops the cops don't even know because they don't have access to this dude's, internet footprint. Their Google searches, their everything. And the episode follows a lot of that stuff. The way in which modern technology allows us all to be connected to these situations immediately, and how much of our personal information in a situation in which we are a danger to others or whatever, how much of our personal information is accessible to companies and to the police in general. It's pretty horrifying, but it's also incredibly interesting because it really follows not specific characters, although there are characters in this. It follows, for the most part, for most of the episode, the flow of this information, how information about this suspect is getting from place to place to place to place, from who to whom, how quick it travels across the globe now because the company's in the US, but the crime is taking place in the UK, and it's very interesting. Finally, we get introduced to the Topher Grace character, the CEO of this company. And it would have been very easy, I think, for Black Mirror to make this guy completely unlikable. To make him a just ass. To make him a Mark Zuckerberg. But they didn't do that. They really disarm you immediately because they can't find him at first because he's off on this silence retreat, which seems like this obnoxious sort of new age hipstery thing or whatever. But when someone finally shows up to the house and explains what's happening to him, he's just like there and he's doing yoga, or not yoga, I'm sorry, he's doing meditation, and they explain what happens to him, and the first words out of his mouth are just, oh fuck. And it really disarms you as an audience member because you expect him to be this pompous, holier than thou asshole, and he really isn't. He's one of the only people in this sort of hostage situation that seems to have empathy for Adam Scott's character. Eventually, Adam Scott does get him on the phone through a series of events. You just watch the episode if you haven't seen it. It's very interesting. Again, it's all about that flow of information, and how instant access to that information changes scenarios like this. Finally, he gets Topher Grace on the phone, and he tells him a story. And it's the story of how his girlfriend died. And he reveals it wasn't a drunk driver that killed her, although that he did hit a drunk driver and killed the drunk driver as well. Andrew Scott, he's the one who hit the car. He's the one who killed his girlfriend because he got a notification on his phone while he was driving, and he looked at it. And the speech he gives is one of the best. I'm not going to say Black Mirror is full of monologues, but there are episodes with monologues. 15 Million Merits, for instance. It's a great monologue he gives, where he's just trying to... He just desperately needed to tell the creator of this app, you make these things addictive, and I couldn't look away. And that's on me. I'm not blaming you entirely, but I just needed to let you know this happened. And he's crying, and the performance is amazing. And then Topher Grace's character talks to him very genuinely and talks like, listen, when I started this, it wasn't supposed to be this, but it just grew and it got out of my control. And it's an interesting thing. If Mark Zuckerberg wasn't an asshole, it would be a good parallel to Mark Zuckerberg. But this idea that you can create something like a Facebook or whatever with the best of intentions, not understanding the Pandora's box you've opened as far as misinformation, as far as people being so attached to screens that they're endangering other people's lives, when they're driving or whatever. This episode was essentially just a don't text and drive, don't look at your phone and drive, don't distract and drive PSA, but it's the most effective one I've ever seen. The emotion really hits you, and I highly recommend this to anyone. This might be one of the better I think this is one of the better episodes of Black Mirror. It's really that good, and it mostly hinges on the performances of Andrew Scott and Topher Grace. They do an excellent job. So check this one out for sure. It also has a really good ending where the hostage situation is about to end, but Andrew Scott's character is going to kill himself. And at this point, the hostage has heard the story as well. And he's like, dude, don't kill yourself, don't do it. So they start wrestling for the gun. And at that point, the police chief decides the snipers, take the shot. And you see the reticle, you see a perspective from the sniper. And the reticle's going over the hostage, and then Andrew Scott, and then the hostage, and then Andrew Scott, and then the hostage, and Andrew Scott. You don't know what's going to happen or who's going to get shot. And then you hear the gunshot, cut to black, you don't find out what happened, and then there's just a montage of people on their phones getting notifications, presumably about this news event unfolding in the UK about this hostage situation, and they're all looking at their phones to see what happened. Oh boy, Charlie Brooker, he knows how to hit you. He really does. It's a really effective episode. I highly recommend it. Best episode of the season. If you're only going to watch one episode of this season, I don't know why you'd do that, but if you only watched one, this is the one to watch. Now, the final episode of the season, Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2, starring Miley Cyrus as pop star Ashley O, Angry Rice as Rachel, and Madison Davenport as Jack. This was the weakest episode of the season. If you're going to skip any episode this season, this is the one to skip. Not to say it's awful or anything. There's nothing terrible in it. There have been worse episodes of Black Mirror. But this one felt a little overlong, and how I would describe it is R-rated Disney Channel original movie. Now, that might sound cool at first, but then you realize, wow, Disney Channel original movies are, if you don't have nostalgia for them, are written pretty poorly. This reminded me of that mostly because of the main characters are kids around the same age as people who would be in a Disney Channel original movie. And I'm not just saying this because Miley Cyrus is in this, by the way. She's not even the focus for most of it. Most of the focus is on these two sisters, Rachel and Jack, and they get this AI assistant that's based on the I'm just going to call her Miley Cyrus and Hannah Montana, because that's basically what they're playing without playing it. They get a little AI assistant based on the Miley Cyrus Hannah Montana character, and they argue about it for a while. Meanwhile, the real Miley Cyrus has a ant/manager that doesn't like that Miley Cyrus wants to do less poppy, less Hannah Montana-esque stuff, and wants to be more genuine with, like, her music and what she wants to do. But the ant is so afraid of her losing market share and losing fans, she won't let her. So what the ant ends up doing is putting her in a coma chemically against her will, and then using she goes to St. Juniper's Hospital, by the way, from San Junipero and Black Museum. They put this thing on her head, and as she's in a coma, they extract her thoughts and use it to make new music, and they also develop a hologram to allow her to sing. The extracting the music from her dreams, and it's sort of a nightmare at first, is the scariest part of the episode to me. Just using this person's thoughts against their will and commodifying it is so disgusting to me. But meanwhile, what's happening is they made all these AI assistants based off the Hannah Montana character. The two sisters have one. At some point it glitches out, and they hook it up to their dad's AI brain scanner computer system, which he has because he is a exterminator who is developing rat traps based on the minds of rats. So he scans rat brains and puts them in his traps, like cookies from earlier Black Mirror episodes. This is all just set up so he has that computer in the basement that they can then use to plug in the AI thing, but whatever. So they plug it in, and a brain scan comes up, and it turns out the entire brain of Hannah Montana or Miley Cyrus has been scanned into this AI thing. They just put a limiter on it so it's like kid-friendly. So they undo the limiter, and all of a sudden it's just her. It's no longer this poppy Hannah Montana toy. It's like really her. She then finds out about she finds out about herself being in a coma. She deduces that her aunt must have done it, and from there it's just sort of hijinks to get into the aunt's house where the body is, so the toy can try and help the real version of herself. And this is where it gets Disney Channel original movie-ish. It's just a bunch of preteens and teens kind of dicking around, and they have a scheme. There's some like hijinks when they get into the mansion, and they have to deal with the guards by lying to them, and they're the dumbest lies ever. They're the dumbest guards ever for believing these lies. But it's R-rated because Miley Cyrus says the F word a lot. And then Miley Cyrus robot unplugs her body so she can die in peace. But that actually wakes her up, and she's fine, and she confronts the ant. And it's a happy ending. It's an alright little thing. It's just not a very good Black Mirror episode. I'm not saying intentionally skip it. There's enough in it that I think you'll enjoy it, but it's kind of one that, against the wishes of Andrew Scott's character from episode 2, you're probably going to be looking at your phone a lot, just like, okay, they're doing hijinks or whatever. But anyway, the first 2 episodes of the season were good, and pretty strong. I'm including Bandersnatch in this season because it was so recent, relatively recent. So overall, I think the season was positive. It hit the same ratio they normally do. There was 1 bad one, 2 good ones, 1 great one. Ooh, excuse me. So overall, good season. I'm okay with them going to the 3-episode format, back to it from before the Netflix days, but I always like more episodes, but I understand that Charlie Brooker probably has a lot to do and doesn't have time to write all these anymore, so I guess that's it. If you guys had any different thoughts than me about this season of Black Mirror, leave them in the comments, give it a like if you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you want more of this stuff. I'm going to be back to do more reviews, more talking about movie, TV, game news, whatever. And I guess that is it. I am going to go be afraid of my electronic devices. So, see you guys next time.